Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the program. Today we're going to talk about Western Europe and the snapshot in history where Neanderthals and modern humans, or rather Neanderthals were overtaken by modern humans in terms of population and the replacement of technology. Some new research has come out that sort of redefines exactly what happened in terms of which humans went where at what time, and also this article and this research elucidates not only the dates but also the manner in which this replacement happened, and also challenges the prevalent thought. It not only challenges the mainstream theory of what happened in terms of what was going on back then, but also it encourages the advancement of other contending theories, which I'll go into in a second. This comes out of the University of Seville, and it centers around this place called Bajondillo Cave in Spain. And if you guys look at this map here, if you guys look at Spain on the bottom left, it's right next to the Strait of Gibraltar and across the Mediterranean from present-day Morocco or Northern Africa. And it's here that we see these AMHs, or anatomically modern humans. We see them and their tools sort of replace the Neanderthals and their tools at this area. And this new research pushes back the date from 33,000 BC to around 43,000 BC. So 10,000 years calibration or adjustment to the timeline has now basically been amended to this theory. So it was thought of for a long time that Western Europe, especially, most of it was, the population was, quote, replaced by these AMHs around 45,000 years ago. But the people in Spain, the Neanderthals in Spain, took a lot longer. Originally they thought it was about 32,000 years ago, right? So because of that, it completely changes the theory of what happened. So modern humans replaced Neanderthals at this site approximately 44,000 years ago. This research is going to be published in the Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. And it shows that the replacement of Neanderthals by modern humans in southern Iberia, which is Spain, began early rather than late in comparison to the rest of Western Europe. So if you guys look at this picture here, this is a Neanderthal skull on the left and the modern human skull on the right. And then another thing that this research centers on are their respective tools, their type of tools. So on the left, you see this 45,000 years and greater, which refers to the tools that Neanderthals were using, called Mousterian tools. And then we have the modern human tools, which is less than 44,000 years ago. These are calibrated dates now. It's called the Aurignacian type of tool. And if you can see, they both look distinctly different. The Aurignacian looks a lot more blunt, whereas the Mousterian is a lot sharper. And these are the dates that they've come to now. And of course, they can be calibrated again in the future, pending new evidence. But this is what they at this cave in southern Iberia. The replacement of Neanderthal theory, which is still they're not even sure if that even happened. They think that anatomically modern humans, and as well as other humans, were probably coexisting for a few thousand years at the very least. So when dates like this get radically changed, more theories start popping up, and more theories gain weight, and other theories lose steam. So up until now, the prevalent thought was that the final replacement was 39,000 years ago in Western Europe, but now all that is basically scrapped. Now they don't even know what the latest or the earliest was now, or when the final replacement was. It's all up in the air now, because they thought for a long time, again, that the Iberian Neanderthals were the last ones to be replaced. So this new dating obviously calibrates the replacement theory. Further research is necessary to determine. Now here's the big part: so this is going to be the new, what you would call the new discussion or the new debate now, which is whether this new dating indicates an earlier replacement of Neanderthals which is what the mainstream has talked about and was the thesis of this article in the first place, or the alternative, which is a more complex scenario of coexistence, which I think is probably closer to the truth, just because of all of these like the Denisovan people. Even though that's a completely different region, it shows that people in Asia at the time who were either they either went to Africa or Siberia or whatever, or they settled where they were. And then there is also this group from the Middle East and even Northern Africa that made the move to Western Europe at this time. So it just proves that migrations were happening all the time, and the fact that Neanderthals and Denisovans, which again are really far away from Western Europe, if we're talking about if you're back in those days where you're just traveling in foot or by freshwater boats or anything like that, that's still a long way. And this just goes to show that humans get around, and they could travel a great distance in a short amount of time. And this just proves the hunches that a lot of scholars had about these humans migrating toward Europe for whatever reason, they don't know, through the Strait of Gibraltar, and now even cutting across the Mediterranean, which they ruled out for a long time. They just thought there was this one way, which was through Asia Minor and the more eastern parts of Europe, and then they spread from right to left, or from east to west, and they thought that was just the only steady stream of people coming. But now they're finding out that it came from all directions, from the east to west, or north, in the case of Bahundil, north to or south to north. So again, this is going to be a huge discovery, and it's interesting. Part of the reason why I'm making this video is because it's sort of to sharpen our lens, so to speak. We can kind of keep this in mind and say, okay, this makes sense because in light of this new evidence, there are people who were migrating at this time. So it makes it easier to get closer to what was going on back then. And remember, the sea levels are a lot lower back in these days. You guys, as you can see here, you can't really make it out too well, but you see this green next to the Atlantic Ocean. All this was above the sea level at this time, 44,000 years ago. So again, people were probably living here as well, because people tend to live near the coast. So co-author of the study, Jimenez Espejo, explains that the takeover by modern humans at the site at Bahundil was not associated with a Heinrich event. So Heinrich event is a severe cooling event. They were able to effectively rule that out, and that the fact that the transition between Neanderthal tools to AMH tools or Aurignacian tools wasn't a climate thing, or at least it wasn't solely because of it. It must have been some other reason rather, and who knows what that is. Yuval Harari thinks that it seems to be because humans were anatomically modern humans had a better sense of organization, of community and cooperation, and because we were able to overcome our physical inferiority compared to the Neanderthals, we were able to make up with teamwork and planning ahead, and perhaps there was some sort of uprising or some sort of movement not related to the climate, maybe a political movement or a social movement, something like that, that led them to, flood Western Europe. And the fact that they're able to confidently rule out a Heinrich event is very interesting. Now, maybe it was a different climate event. Maybe it wasn't severe cooling. Maybe something else happened. Maybe there was a drought or something. But whenever there is a severe cooling, there tends to be a drought. So I don't know how that could be reconciled. Or a meteor might have hit them, although they haven't talked about that. This is way before Younger Dryas. So this is like 30,000 years before Younger Dryas event. So maybe that's over one precessional cycle before the Younger Dryas, which is another interesting thing that I was thinking about as I read this. And perhaps there was another meteor event that we just haven't found, or perhaps we have found the crater, but we have overlooked it, or maybe the dates are wrong. But either way, the possibilities are endless for the reason that humans came in even earlier than we originally thought in a place like Spain, which again has a very important, in terms of geography, it's very important from a human survival standpoint. So if you're a human, an anatomically modern human, it would be very appealing if you had the ways and means and knowledge of a place like Spain, with all of its caves, its proximity next to the Mediterranean Ocean, and the fair climate at the time. That life would have been a lot easier to live there compared to other places. It was a very attractive place, so it does make sense that humans would live there. And the fact that it's pushed back even further in time, 10,000 plus years, it's not out of the realm of possibility that individuals within the genus Homo were living amongst each other, and maybe they even had countries or whatever. Maybe they were communicating somehow. We don't know. The possibilities are very broad here. There can be many directions that we can go in, but until we find smoking gun evidence, it's very difficult to build a case for that. But this is one of those instances in which the research has been done and the timeline has been recalibrated, which, I don't know, calibration is a pretty good word because they're trying to get closer to the truth, but it's just going to be calibrated again and again and again. So again, it's not a permanent thing. There might be another monkey wrench thrown into the mix. Actually, I'm pretty certain that's going to happen probably within the next few years. So, or if not this year. So the co-author continues, finding such an early Aurignacian from a cave so close to the sea adds to speculation that the Mediterranean coast could have been used by modern humans dispersing into Europe. The dating also fits with growing evidence that Homo sapiens had already spread rapidly across much of Eurasia more than 40,000 years ago. And that's the conclusion that they're coming to. Two things come to my mind when I think of the Mediterranean coast and the fact that Homo sapiens specifically were already across Eurasia more than 40,000 years ago. The first thing is, it's confirmed that they found ruins under the Mediterranean Ocean, that there were stone megaliths and evidence of not only boats, like old boats, but ruins of a city. And because of that, because remember, the Mediterranean, if you take the water out, it becomes a basin, much like Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a basin. So if humans were already familiar with the Mediterranean coast, and if there really was a city that is now submerged within the Mediterranean Ocean, then logically it follows that it would make sense as that the Mediterranean would be an avenue for migration for AMHs because they're already familiar with that land. So that's number one. The second thing is Mount Toba. So there, 70,000 or so BC, there was a giant, like, species-killing, life-killing event in Indonesia in which this mountain called Mount Toba exploded, and only about 1,000 to 2,000 humans were left alive from this. And 30,000 years later, which would be this date here, given in the Bahondillo site, if that were the case, then there's only 30,000 years for humans to spread across. Presumably would be Indonesia, where they survived, or someone survived somewhere. Probably in Asia, probably in Siberia, and then they came back and then repopulated the earth and then went west. And how much this has been factored in, this Mount Toba event, into these dates, very limited because there's not a lot of evidence left, but I feel like the case could be made for that in the future. So if that's added, it's just a little food for thought when reading about this in terms of the grand scale of anatomically modern humans and the history of Homo sapiens and other members of our cousins like Neanderthals and Denisovans and Homo erectus, and so on and so forth. Another thing that this evidence does is it revives the idea that the Strait of Gibraltar could have been a potential dispersal route for early modern humans out of Africa. The Strait of Gibraltar has always been talked about as having some sort of pre-Diluvian significance. Plato said that it was beyond he referred to it as the Pillar of Heracles, and beyond it was Atlantis, and people, stragglers from Atlantis, went back across the Strait of Gibraltar to seek refuge, and they, according to legend, they became the Proto-Athenians and all those people along the Mediterranean. So the thing that this tells me is that all of this evidence I just went over, and all of these thoughts, that humans have some sort of ancient link with this area. That there's no doubt about it. Whether you want to talk about Atlantis, whether you want to talk about Neanderthals, and whether you want to talk about anatomically modern human tools that supplanted the Neanderthal tools and all that stuff, all we can say for certain is that humans played a significant role within the last, let's say, 500,000 years, 500,000, maybe even less, 250,000, let's say. Whatever the number is, we've been playing a huge role in this within the last million years. So it makes sense that they can make all these connections. And it also makes sense that if people were living in Western Europe 100,000 years ago, let's say, and then there's this mass extinction event and there are people who survive, it makes sense that eventually those group of survivors will repopulate the area that was once inhabited by their species. So who knows what was going on exactly. This makes me excited, and I feel like we're getting closer to the truth. So let me know what you guys think about this. I'll have the link in the description, and I'll see you guys later.